Item 1.06, operations. Dr. King.
Chairman Houston, members of the board, point 106, operations, CIP plan review, and information technology plan update will be presented by Dr. Simmons and Mr. Gay, along with other supporters. Dr. Simmons.
Dr. Houston, Dr. King, thank you. Members of the Board of Education, we'd like to provide you an update today on CIP so that we remain transparent with regard to how we're spending the funds. And Rex Gay is going to provide that information. And Gephardt Hartle will be standing in for Andrea Secor today, who is on vacation. And he's going to talk about the lockbox funds, the monies that we received from the tax increase with the city for construction and technology. Mr. Gay?
Okay. Good afternoon, Dr. Houston, Dr. King, and members of the board. The purpose of our presentation today, and I think you have included in your package, is to show you what our 2015 CIP, approved CIP document is, and this is the document that we have also sent over to the city's budget office. And as you might notice, if you look at the projects here, Project 11 and 12, you might notice that we've included track improvements at Granby High School. And also, as a placeholder, we just called the auditorium structural repairs at Maury High School a project as well. Now, we haven't included any dollar funds in that section, and that's because we won't know or have an estimate on that work until tomorrow. We're expecting a draft report from our engineer tomorrow, which I think is tomorrow the 17th? Okay, well, that's close enough. We'll get that tomorrow. Therefore, we'll know what we're facing. The track improvements is a project that the city has requested that we include when they gave us the additional $300,000 this year. And so normally, this fund would only have $3 million, but as you can see, we have $3,300,000. We've also asked the city what they wanted to improve on the track. So since we don't know, I've made a notation there that says pending city direction, okay? And so,
It's not really a track in the traditional sense.
right.
It's a paved area that surrounds the athletic field. And the field is actually a city park. It's not solely athletic field, so that's one of the issues with that.
Right. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is the format that we're using to submit these projects. As you might notice, we have a column for expenditures, encumbrances, balances, and the status of the project. And what we intend to do is, at any time you might request it, we can present these at the school board meetings. We're going to do it monthly at the construction committee meetings and anywhere else you might need it. And so whenever we present this, we'll also forward it to the city's budget department to keep them informed as to how we're spending the money and how the funds are encumbered. And I think you all might remember we agreed to this a little over a month ago when there was some question about how we managed and kept track of the projects.
Okay. Any questions on the CIP report? Yes.
When do we forward this to the city?
I forwarded this 2 days ago.
And is that meeting their time requirements?
Normally, they call and say, can you, forward your list of projects,
And it's
what you
usually done
intend to
in
do.
July following the annual operating budget.
Yes,
So it in some way is connected to the annual operating budget, obviously.
it's not in our annual operations
Yeah.
budget, but it is, during the annual operating budget. But it's not in, let's say, my budget specifically.
Right. But that's been the tradition over years.
Yes,
The reason why I ask is if we end up talking about master milestones or anything bigger than that, I believe that there's some other considerations that may need to come into play, and maybe in future years, a more extensive conversation early in the year could be useful. And the reason for that is not that anything that you're doing is questionable, but my fear is and my hope is, since 2009, we've been under difficult economic times. And if it were not for the city, because of state and federal cutbacks, we would have been in trouble. Luckily, the city of Norfolk had the ability and came to our support and helped us. Because of all that deferral, because of all the deferred maintenance and everything else, I just want to open up the possibility for us looking at a grand scheme of things and having that conversation to enhance any consideration for next year. But thank you.
Thank you for the detailed report, and thank you for the additional columns. And then I think we discussed, too, that you're going to send this to them on a quarterly basis to the city as well, right?
Yes,
Just so that they're always current and they don't have to come to us and ask.
Right.
But that they'll know on a quarterly basis, this is what is A, B, C, and D.
right.
Yeah, and I think that gets to your point, Warren, too, that there's always a current understanding from the city and the division as to what is happening under the CIP umbrella.
That's right.
We've agreed to do that because there might be adjustments based upon
Right.
many conditions, and so we would update them as we adjust our CIP.
Right, exactly. Good. Thank you very much for doing that.
Oh, you are? Oh,
Are you gonna go over the CIP 2014?
we can, if you want to.
Well, I just had a quick question. Can you just
Okay.
remind us what the Tidewater Park Elementary School roof is about? I know you say it's on hold and resources were sent elsewhere. What's that about?
Okay, what that is that we had included the roof replacement at Tidewater Park in that particular year. And I think you might remember doing the demographic study, there was some indication that we wouldn't know exactly what was gonna happen with Tidewater Park down the road. This amount right here, the 500,000, is an amount that you would use to replace it with a built-up roof. And so what was decided at the time is that we would use these funds to shore up other projects and continue patchwork at Tidewater Park until a more final decision was made as to, where we would be with that school.
So what you're doing with the patchwork is sufficient?
What we're doing with the patchwork is sufficient, and we've decided that when and if we have to make a roof replacement there, that we'll use a different type roof, so it'll cost a little bit less than this one that you're looking at now.
Perhaps I can help, Mr. Gale. If you remember, we received a letter from the mayor prior to the increase in taxes to help meet the goal of 5 schools in 5 years. And in that letter, the name was mentioned, Tidewater Park, implication being something. And I
Right.
think it was wise, because sometime in the past 5 to 10 years, there's been expenditures for CIP, and then big decisions about facilities use or non-use, and then it led someone to believe that maybe that expenditure was premature and it would have been used reversed. So I think part of what Mr. Gay is responding to is there was some indication that somebody had something in mind there. I don't think in any way it's designed to be harmful to any school. That's my impression. This is-
Yeah, no, I get that. It just caught my attention, obviously,
Yeah.
because it was in red, and then also there's just back and forth over whether anything's gonna happen in the area for 10 years, and so.
Right.
Right.
Just because someone
Right.
says it's a good idea, it would just raise concerns if we end up having some other issues there, so just caught my attention, that's all.
So
I do
what
think
you-
it's a conversation we ought to have with
Either we're
every,
gonna-
other people.
Right, are we gonna do it or are we not?
Right.
Right, so what you should know, though, is if conditions were to change and that roof would be in much poorer condition than it is now, and patching wouldn't suffice, believe we would take that roofing project and substitute it into another project and do it immediately. So,
Good job.
I mean, wherever the need arises the most is where the money goes.
That's how you roll.
That's how we do it.
I mean,
And-
that's the way he's been doing it
That's
ever
right.
since I've been on the construction committee.
It sounds
Yeah.
current.
Okay,
It's amazing.
all right, thank you. Rex?
All right. As Dr. Simmons introduced, my name is Gerhard Hartl. I'm the network manager, speaking for Andrea Sikora. She's not here today. The technology and construction lockbox funds that we received this year will be used for improvements to the district, aligning directly with year 1 of the 5-year IT strategic plan. These plans include, number 1, full building wireless for all schools. Middle schools are already full building wireless, and many of elementary, but this will actually shore up the rest of the high schools and the elementary schools and auxiliary buildings that didn't have the funds as the rest of the buildings or had wireless added. An example of some of these schools include Booker T. Washington, that will be taking part of a Virginia Department of Education backpack initiative along with Lake Taylor High School. And also Poplar Halls, which will be, of course, is a transformational school. The next step will be a phase 1 of the BYOD, which is the purchase and installation of identity management software. That's basically something that can determine who a person is with a device that's not NPS and basically control the traffic necessary to who they are. The next 2 steps, upgrading NTC with all new networking infrastructure, along with upgrading infrastructure throughout the district for cores and switches that are starting to age. That's to increase the backbone that the BYOD initiatives is going to require in order to support the bandwidth. And of course, there's many aging phone systems that will need to be replaced. So that is definitely on the table as the rest of the lockbox funds, including data center upgrades and of course maintenance contracts to make sure everything is continually shore up for that 5-year strategic plan.
Okay, questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else for operations? Okay. Okay, thank you all. Next
Just a
item.
real quick comment.
Sure.
Where we started from 3 years ago,
Mhm.
the technology has improved tremendously. It's amazing. We had schools that could barely, didn't have computers. So this is, we've come a long way.
I agree, Brad. Okay, item 1.07, finance and business. Dr. King.
Chairman Houston, members of the board, 1.07, finance and business, reference to General Assembly budget actions and impact, et cetera, will be presented by Dr. Thornton.
Good afternoon, Chairman Houston, school board members. You have in your packet for agenda item 1.07, a one-page budget summary. The title indicates for all funds, but it's actually related specifically to the operating budget. So as you know, the General Assembly did not approve a state budget until June the 12th. So we were pretty much on hold. We had built our budget, it had been approved, it had been appropriated based on then Governor McDonald's introduced biennial budget that again was not approved by the General Assembly until June the 12th. So we need to make some adjustments to align with that final General Assembly budget, as well as adjust our federal revenue for next year based on an anticipated increase in Medicaid reimbursements for next year. The bottom line of the recommended adjustments would add an additional capacity in the budget of $142,672. And when I say capacity, it increases the current adopted budget for FY15 from $317,618,431 to $317,761,103. So that additional budget capacity of $142,672 would allow us to recommend to the board at this point that the board restore 2 of the school nurse positions that were reduced during the budget balancing process. You'll recall that originally we had several items that were pending final General Assembly action. We were cautiously hopeful, I guess, that we would receive additional monies if the state Senate budget was to pass, but you know the politics that came about as a result of that didn't allow us to, or any school divisions to receive additional funding, as well as a reforecasting of state revenues. So the bottom line is we expect to see a reduction in state funding of a total of $357,328, as well as an increase in federal funding of $500,000, giving us a net increase in operating revenues of $142,672. Again, to balance the budget, that would give us additional expenditure budget capacity of $142,672. And again, the recommendation at this point in time would be to utilize a significant portion of that to add or restore 2 of the previously reduced 5 school nurse positions to bring the total increase in nurse positions for FY15 to 7. We had originally planned 10, we reduced it back to 5, but now this recommendation would restore 2 of the 5 that had been reduced.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Dr. Stewart?
We initially heard of this proposal following a very extensive student support services chat. And initially, whereas I had other preferences, I said, well, I'll go home. But after further thought, I reviewed all of our budget discussions, and I have to tell you that Dr. King and Dr. Thornton, I highly respect all that y'all do in budget and finance, and you do it very well. But I remembered as I reviewed our discussions on this budget that there was also fewer high school teachers that we were able to support. And I worried greatly then, and I still worry, that instruction be our focus. In no way are nurses less important than anyone in our system. Custodians, secretarial support staff, all are part of the teaching team, and nurses are critical. But for me, the focus on instruction is critical this time because we just were recognized at 2 of our high schools for their specialty programs, Moray and Norfolk. We know that Granby has the International Baccalaureate program. And my concern is with this, and again, here it crops up again, the state's providing less funds. We're fortunate. We have a few dollars, not much. And my request would be to consider the possibility of, could this money benefit, particularly our high school specialty programs, to consider that before we make the decision to automatically move it to nurses. And there could have been 10 areas that you would have applied it that would have all been good. And there's nothing wrong with applying it at the nurses level. But at this time, my preference has to remain instruction, and in the instruction of the areas where we are noted at our specialty programs at the high school. So I'll pause right now. And again, I greatly respect Dr. King, your judgment, and Dr. Thornton's judgment regarding budget issues. I just have right now a focus on instruction, and I don't want to leave that focus. I absolutely have to. Thank you.
Well, I would add to this discussion that there was a list of 5 areas of deferred items in the budget planning that included 5 instructional technology resource teachers, as well as the technology system engineers, school-based. So an area of instruction or instructional support, those were the items, in addition to the nurses, that were on the deferred list. And open campus, yes. I didn't mention that because of the amount there, but yes, open campus was as well. So just food for thought in terms of what we set aside in terms of additional funding that we'd anticipated when we created the larger budget amount of money that we would ask the city for, and in terms of additional funding. Okay.
Just a little background as to why the recommendation is focused on school nurses at this point. You'll recall that we have a 3-year phase-in program where historically the state/the city had been providing nurses to serve in our schools. But the state gave us indication 2 years ago that they would no longer support that. So we had to develop what has become a 3-year plan to transition from relying on state nurses and city nurses to bringing those in to be NPS employees. And we were going to do 10 FTEs for each of 3 consecutive years. That's why this past year, FY14, we did 10. We had indicated that we would do 10 for 15 and that we would do 10 for 16, with the idea that we would need to have at least one healthcare provider in each of our basically comprehensive schools. And by adding these 2, it would allow us to have a total of 50 between what we would employ here in the school division, what we would continue in year 3 to rely on from the state and the city, and then that will position us to have one healthcare provider in each of those comprehensive locations. If we were to do something different, then we would again have to try to deal with temp services and the challenge of not having a full-time healthcare provider in each of those locations.
Thank you. Okay, other comments? 'Cause we'll have to make a decision on this, and we really should in the business meeting tonight.
Actually, in terms of process, what we wanted the board to have tonight is what the bottom line budget impact will be, because the city council next Tuesday will make its final appropriation amendment to include this additional budget capacity to bring our budget from the 317.6 to the 317.7.
Right.
The board does not have to necessarily take action on this recommendation tonight,
We'll need to next month.
next month, following the final appropriation amendment from the council.
Okay. And so we have a work session on August the 6th, and then, of course, our regular board meeting on, what's that date? Janelle, that's the 23rd? The 20th. So we're talking $142,000 here. So, you know, I mean, I know all the cities are significant, but I don't want to see us kick this can, though. I mean, I think we, you know, even though we don't have to actually make a decision in terms of voting tonight.
And if I might, Mr. Chairman, I think HR and Dr. Harold Lance would agree that trying to staff these positions with RNs is a challenge. So if we could get some indication from the board
Right.
that you would support utilizing this additional capacity for these two positions, then it would allow HR to kind of get moving on the process
Right,
very quickly, because the clock is ticking,
sure.
and to attract RNs is a challenge.
All right,
Question.
yes.
Is it possible that, council approves the 142 without what it's earmarked for?
Yeah,
For us to have further
yeah, they'll
conversation?
just approve the bottom line appropriation.
That's what I heard you
They're
say.
not, we're not asking them to approve how we're gonna use it,
I didn't think so.
nor
So
do they ever.
therefore,
And I wasn't saying that for the council, and I was just talking about the best use of our time, because on August 6th, we're gonna have another loaded agenda
that's right.
in terms of our work session. And so I was just trying, if at all possible, not to move this to that agenda, if it is something indeed that we could take care of in the next 5 minutes.
I apologize, because I just think in a $300+ million budget, I know that this is a small thing, and I know that you're looking out for the whole for the next 5 years. But instruction is a focus for me right now, and I would hate to relent at this moment,
Sure.
but certainly we need to get the 142,672 on the $300+ million budget approved. But then I'd like to have a little more discussion about where is the best place to put it. And there's no way to have enough money to do all we need to do. And
Okay.
thanks for hearing that. And again, I greatly respect all that you do.
Understood.
Okay, any other thoughts? Okay, so, we will have to make a decision on this next month. We're gonna have a choice. So if we're not going down, your reticence is confusing me this evening, but,
Well, as a board, do we want to consider a vote now for the use of the additional funding?
Are you looking for a motion?
no, because we don't have to vote on it tonight, but we need to make a decision. We will discuss it on August 6th. We want to support the nurses, even though we may not vote on it this evening, so that at least the HR, as was requested, could do their due diligence and student support services in identifying RNs. I just want to know what our pledge is.
I don't mind being the only voice here, and I don't want to hold up the process. We've got too many good things to do. But I'd be happy to be the sole voice on this, and I'd be happy to be the only no vote, but I don't want to stand the process the way, because we got much more important things
I'd
to
rather
do.
move it forward if we can, one way or another.
What does that mean?
I'd like to address it now, and then if we're gonna vote on it, let's vote on it, let's not kick it down the road.
Okay.
I would prefer to do that.
So, you know, Dr. Stewart has made the case about considering the need for 2 additional teaching positions. We have these other items on the deferred list, so we have the information. What are your thoughts?
Actually, I'm not really saying 2 additional teaching positions. I just wanted to explore
In terms
the
of
focus of
instruction?
instruction. Yes, sir. I can't be that clear because I have to defer
Right.
to Dr. King with the advice of Dr. Thornton on that. I can't be so clear about presiding alternate.
So here are two options. Our two options would be to move forward and accept the administration's recommendation, use of these funds, and vote on the amendment tonight in the business meeting, or to defer the matter for further exploration or discussion on the 6th and vote on it on the 20th. Those are our two options.
Well, I think we can vote on the total package tonight, right?
We don't have to
What
do
the
that,
use
though.
is.
I would suggest that we wait until after the council has made their final appropriation
Right.
amendment next week. In the event, we don't anticipate, but obviously, we don't want to take action today prematurely on the
Okay.
bottom line amendment, but to get some indication from the board for, as I said, to continue to move forward with recruiting for these positions might be helpful, instead of waiting 2 or 3 weeks.
And we're saying we're not ready to say definitively that we want to use the funding for nurses tonight, okay? And then we discuss it on the 6th, and then we'll certainly have to make a decision at the latest on the 20th. That's what I need from,
Well, I don't know if it's tonight, but I was just gonna ask Dr. King, what's your reaction to what you're hearing?
Well, when we consider the needs for nurses, 2 would allow us to have 1 at each location. That's on one end. The issue that Dr. Stewart has raised, I believe, centers on, I think you mentioned high school. And we've been very careful to take a look at the numbers, the ratios, the programs, and the last update is that we felt good about where we were with that. Mr. Coleman weighing in on high school and what we talked about previously with programs and adjustments that we need to make to balance people-teacher ratios and be good stewards of dollars as we move forward. So I guess I would ask, or do you feel that we're still in good standing at a high school level in terms of what Dr. Stewart alluded to, when we look at nurses and then we look at the high schools? And because really what it would equate to would be 2 positions, and then the other piece is that we've got a discussion tomorrow that is around open campus and looking for positions that would allow us to move forward with that. So my role is weighing all of those things to determine which one we move forward with. So, response on high school?
Well, to begin with, when you talk about specialty programs, the reductions that we've made this year will not impact specialty programs. So that is not on the table right now. There may be some indirect, because other classes will have increased in size. We have had some reductions, in the foreign language area, which at Granby, that would probably have the biggest impact, but that was a decision that the administration there made in terms of their reductions based on that particular language, not being, the teachers having resigned and not having candidates to actually even replace. So it made that decision a little bit easier. In terms of, the nursing, I think I could guarantee that it wouldn't matter what building, you go to, those schools are going to say we want a registered or an RN in our building. The healthcare piece is critically important, to every school. So I think, in terms of whether it's an instructional side or whether it's a nurse, there's probably a pretty good balance there because they're both needed. I think we could, if we stay with, the budget process, my feeling is, you've already put in place a structure, you've identified, the areas that you had to kind of set aside. My personal opinion is that you stay with that, and that if we do have some issues with the instructional side, we come back and address it in the next budget cycle. And I'm sure we're going to have some.
And I just wanted to venture there because I wanted to ensure that none of that thinking had changed. So with that, that's why we landed at a recommendation of 2 nurses.
And again, not to belabor the point, and Dr. Harold Lance may want to jump in here, but the goal is to have an RN in every single location. I think we still have some holdover LPN and aides at some of the less critical need schools. I don't want to jump out of my lane here, but is that true?
Yes.
But going forward, I know we've hired RNs.
Right, we have hired our RNs and have committed to continuing to hire and the health department, even as this transition or requirement started, had also committed to not hiring any staff members other than RNs. And so the need is great. We have worked with the health department and a number of agencies throughout the year related to, as Dr. Thornton mentioned, the coverage with temporary nurses throughout the district. That has not been the easiest for schools as well, without having the stability of having, excuse me, a nurse assigned at a school being able to meet those needs. And so it's a very critical concern.
And very costly.
Yes, and very costly.
Yes. I appreciate the opportunity to express things. And in no way was I trying to earmark any particular program. I was using it as an example. Instruction is the area. If someone tells me that these funds could not be used to shore up particularly our secondary instructional programs, and that we'll be just fine, then I would be more happy. There's no way that I can say that the nurses aren't needed. It's just my feeling with all that we've had to do and all the reductions, and if it weren't for the city, with the state continuing to cut us and the federal government continuing to cut us, if it weren't for the city, we wouldn't be here. I just worry that we're having to reduce our specialty program, not just for gifted and talented, but for the kids. And there's 2 or 3 of our priorities as school board that we say we want to do. $142,000 can't do everything. I'm not willing to split the baby here and go 1-to-1. It's a silly thing. But being heard is what I wanted. My focus, my goal is high-quality instruction.
Okay, so due to the silence, I'm going to ask that whatever questions need to be asked and answered between now and the 6th, that it will be, we will give about 10 minutes to address this on the 6th, and then we would, of course, make that final amendment on the 20th of August. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, one final matter, master planning. I think some work has been done in that area, and so Dr. Stewart or Dr. Gabriel, whichever one will.
Dr. Gabriel, can I start with something? Because, our
Yes.
consultant for this wasn't as good as Mrs. Banks.
Go right ahead.
Can we do this before
Yes.
you launch into
Yes.
the first? If you would look at the master milestones piece, do you have?
So where is this?
Okay.
Is it on board docs now?
Yeah, Ms. Banks?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. It is the third slide, and it's under master milestones. Our consultant that we employed to do this did not have the capability technologically that Ms. Banks has. So he or she asked me to have you use your 19th century pen and paper, pen or pencil, and
Under your quill.
under your quill. Next to Broad Creek and Compostela, put question marks under 2016. And next to 2017, next to Larchmont and Ocean View, put question marks. That'll become apparent later why I'm asking you to do that. But weren't able to do that because our consultant just wasn't as skilled technologically as Ms. Banks is. Any question about what I'm asking you to do? Question marks under 2016, question mark parallel to Broad Creek, question mark parallel to Compostela, question mark on 2017 parallel
It's under
to
board matters.
Larchmont, question mark parallel to Ocean View, 2017. All right, roll. There you go.
2.05.
Okay, we're just going to take a few minutes of your time to briefly discuss the meeting that Dr. Stewart and I had together on master planning. As you know, as a district, we're trying to come together to look forward ahead and map out some of these major milestones that we want to incorporate over the next 5 years, perhaps even 10 years. And this arrangement that Dr. Stewart and I have come together with is an attempt to simplify the process so that we can bring back information to you all. What we're looking to, if you could just go back to the first slide, Janelle. As far as a roadmap goes, what we're looking to discuss with you today, just briefly, is what we've done in the past, what we can do currently, and then next steps. Next slide. So, if you can just scroll over to the next slide, perfect. Before our time, not prehistoric, but we had a study, the MGT study, which looked at facilities and the facilities use. In 2010, the board has taken action on considering K-8 schools paired to high schools. In 2011, we discussed CTE high school. 2012, the discussion of conversion schools was brought into our discussion, and in 2013, we discussed transformation, finally, open campus. So these are all things that we have done so far. Consensus actions are actions that we, as a board, are in agreement with the city council as well. So we agree with council that we want 5 schools in 5 years. We believe that poverty is a significant factor in academic achievement and success, and we also agree that pre-K, especially rigorous pre-K, is good for our students and would give them a jump start into reading. So this is what has been, and now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stewart.
What can be, referring to what has been, each of those were board actions that were taken. Master planning or master milestones, need to go to that slide, Ms. Banks. There we go. Master planning or master milestones hopefully will create a coherent and coordinated path to accomplishing what Norfolk Public Schools, previous and present, as we've just seen with Dr. Gabriel's slide, have voted for, and consensus items we have committed to within the context of coordinated operating CIP and supplemental budgets. Coordinated operating CIP and supplemental budgets over 5 years, 2015 and on. That can be done. It was done. Recently, Pilot published an article, and in this article we see that the city is coordinating its activities in a master plan with Waterside, Outlet Mall, Hotel, Conference Center, Arts District. This is what is done in the city, this is what is expected, and this is what we can do. It can begin with declaring what we still want regarding those votes that were just highlighted that have been taken since 2009 at least, and when we might achieve each. Let me show one example. And if you can see the example up there, if you put in those question marks under 2016 for Broad Creek and Compostela, and you put in the question marks under 2017 for Larchmont and Ocean View, what can be done is that by 2015, and when we reopen Lafayette, Winona, it could very easily be that things start getting clear, and then when we're reopening Broad Creek and Compostela, 2016, and then when we may reopen Larchmont and Ocean View, 2017, all of those things are possible. That's a scenario, to have many things happen at once. But what we need is time to discuss all of these hopes and ideas, votes that have occurred by the school board over the past 5 or 6 years, before we communicate in order to build stakeholder support. Remember at our retreat that item, the question, stakeholder support. Before we begin to communicate this comprehensive, coherent plan, we need to be clear on it. Note possible milestones of reopening Lafayette, Winona, when Broad Creek, Larchmont, Compostela are all done respectively. Could we then coordinate our K-8 initiative completion? Could we say this vote that was taken several years ago is complete with this school at Lafayette, Winona? Our deferred pre-K and open campus programs, recently supported by the Poverty Commission. It was very exciting to read the report of the Poverty Commission, how they support not only the open campus, but our pre-K and our CTE programs. Yes, the answer I give. Remember, our city has recently revealed, through its master plan, support for such planning. We can do it as well. Finally, after creating clear hopes, we can present budget requests to realize all. Remember all of these things that we've been saying that we want to do. And we can answer these questions that the City Council have been asking. What do you really need? And we can show our community what is possible. Then strategic planning activities. Note, strategic plan must reflect and align with the milestones. There are things that occurred long before the team that's working on this strategic plan, long before they arrived in Norfolk. There are things that perhaps need to be coordinated in addition and woven into this strategic plan. And why do we want to do all this? In order to help students learn, in order to become the cornerstone of a proudly diverse community.
So our next steps, if we can move on to the next slide, are going to be to have scheduled sessions for discussion incorporated within our agenda. We will incorporate individual board members' ideas. Perhaps there's something else in the master milestones that you feel need to be reflected into this planning document. So we want to make sure that we incorporate all of the board's input. And then finally, our goal is to have this completed before September so that we can have this ready for budget planning, CIP, and operations. That's ambitious, but we want to do it.
Okay. So the ask is for more time. The ask is for board members to say, what items do you want to put on the table to be considered as we look at all things together and how they can coordinate it? If we're going to redistrict, we need to coordinate redistricting with some other things. If we're going to do open campus, we need to coordinate those things. There are many things that can be coordinated. The city has done it. We need to do it also. That's my opinion.
Thank you. I think this is a great first step to this. I really do, and I appreciate the time that the two of you have put in just since the second retreat to frame this for us. I think it really helps us to see the picture of where we need to go with it. I would, as we discussed additional items, I would definitely caution us that I like the term master milestones, because I think one of the things that kind of derailed our first attempt was the fact that we had too many items for master planning. And I think master planning should be limited to master milestones. And when you get 30 of them on a list, I think you've lost the term master at that point. Thank you all very much. A couple of hands up, and then we'll make sure we talk about next steps. And this will be the last item on this part of our agenda. Brad?
Are you accepting suggestions? Is there a reason why CTE was not put on there?
No reason at all.
I mean,
As a
CTE
matter of
should
fact,
be.
remember it was on the slide that
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
Gabriel talked to. There are so many things that need to be considered as part of the piece. The next step would be for first board members individually to maybe start saying, these are the things that I think need to be considered. I believe that.
Then I
other
think
board-
CTE should be on
I
there.
think it definitely is one of the things that we voted on, and
Okay.
Well, in addition, can't we just email you two our ideas on?
you can do whatever is best, whatever the group decides.
Ed?
I just have a fundamental need to understand how the master plan fits in with the strategic plan and which drives which. Does the master plan drive the strategic plan, or does the strategic plan drive the master plan?
Intentional use of master milestones, Reverend Haywood, has been used to avoid that kind of quandary. There are things that the board has decided over the past 5 or 6 years that haven't been coordinated with all that can go on. They're not reflected in the strategic plan. Maybe they don't need to be reflected, but at least if they don't, if the K-8 initiative that was to pair a school with each high school of K-8 nature, if we believe that the 3-8 initiative at line 1 completes that, then we need to say that and say that's done and that's good. If CTE, if we're going to do it, we want to say we want to do it, and we need to say how we're going to do it. And we need to coordinate all of that with open campus, with redistricting. There's so many moving parts to this, but the reason why I'm avoiding using the word master plan is to avoid the very problem quandary you're having there, and that is confusing one. Remember, the strategic plan needs to reflect all the things that we said we were going to do. And there are a number of things in addition. Let's say there was a salary study that was presented, very complex salary study that needs to be considered. There are a whole lot of things that need to be considered as a coherent whole. And so far, in my opinion, we haven't been able to do that. The city did it. The city just announced that they've got a master plan to that's just building. Ours is more complex. This is about student learning, and that's more important.
And I don't think either one drives it. I think there should be a very complementary integration of one into the other. But one of the things that Warren mentioned several months ago in talking about this, which I think is very, very important for us, is that once this is one agreed upon and carefully integrated into the strategic plan as it ought to be, I think it also gives us some talking points that really helps our stakeholders. We can't share the strategic plan at a civic league meeting or some other stakeholder meeting, but we could talk about these 5 or 6 major milestones that we're working on in a very kind of a, hand-sized compacted way. And I think it will simplify our kind of big rock conversations internally and especially as we communicate with our stakeholders. Sam?
Along this line, I think that if the board decides that it will follow this path and this schedule, that once that is complete and the board agrees upon what is proposed in the master
Milestone.
initiative, then I think it would need to then be presented to the strategic planning team.
Right.
Drop the slide back.
And so that, then once that happens, then that starts the process of it being also merged into the strategic plan, where appropriate and with strategies and action plans according to what you all have decided along these lines.
Dr. King, the reason for that being in red and bolded,
Mhm.
this must be informed by the strategic plan with the various items. That's why that's bolded, that's why our consultant that was working on this had several young children, one neonate that needed feeding, and she was just not capable of all that she could do technologically that Mrs. Banks can do.
I think you need to
So
just
be
stop
this.
right there. Lauren. There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm with you.
So the part of it that makes me really nervous is the last part, and that's the September. And I swallow hard when I say that, because that
If we push back a few minutes, but it's got to be informed so that we can begin budget planning with CIP planning with everything, so that next presentation includes all of this thinking.
Yeah, I think we need to keep it on all of the work session agendas. I think we need to keep it moving front and center, whether it's 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or 10.
Right.
Seriously, because we are going to start budgeting earlier than later, so we do need to see this. So I think it's just part of our conversation ongoing.
I second
CTE
that.
is going to keep going.
I second that
Open
emotion.
campus.
Okay, any other comments? But I think we need to make sure we do that, because I think this is a good start, and we certainly
May we generate
want to
a
support.
question to Dr. King to make sure the question fits with possibilities, and then that question to fellow board members to generate some ideas, like CTE being included, like other things being included, to see if we could start generating some of that, so that the next time is allotted for this, that we can begin processing that.
Right,
And then that kind of map of 5 years starts filling out, and when you start seeing that maybe redistricting needs to occur here, and maybe the open campus fits better here, you can start moving pieces around. It's not going to happen in one meeting. It's not something you can do in a
Right.
6-hour straight thing. And everybody has to say, this is what's important to me. So do you mind if we generate that question, forward it to you and Dr. King to make sure that the question fits, and then forward it to our board members?
That's good.
Is that okay?
Okay, thank you all very much. All right, the agenda for the 6th of August, the work session agenda has not been completed as of yet. We'll be coming together actually tomorrow. If there are items that you wish to be considered for that, I would ask that you would just, submit them via
I'd like to be considered
email.
sometime for this.
I've noted that.
Okay. All right, then that ends this portion of the agenda, and we'll transition now to prepare for closed session, which begins at 5:30. Thank you.